Your career evolved from hands-on viral vector production and technical leadership into commercial strategy and ultimately founding Convey Bio. What was the pivotal moment when you realized that communication could be just as powerful as the science itself?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much for having me. I guess the pivotal moment for me was a couple of years ago when I was sitting down working at my first job inside of industry. I was kind of up in Canada. There's not a huge biotech ecosystem up here, right? Most of that's concentrated in Europe and down in the United States. And at that point, I saw a little video on LinkedIn of some marketing expert talking about the fact that if you want to become known inside of your space, if you want to become someone who's a bit more of a go-to person for insight or whatnot, the really simple rule is just provide value. Be as useful as possible to people inside of a specific niche, and own it, and just try to be as useful as possible to people inside of that niche. And so that was kind of a little bit of a moment for me, I guess, a pivotal moment for me in terms of my career as well, where I kind of took it upon myself to think, well, I guess I should start posting on LinkedIn and trying to be useful to people inside of the niche of gene therapy, and thankfully enough, that ended up taking off, and so it's now been about 4 years since I first started posting on LinkedIn, and it's been pretty transformative, just in terms of the central premise being be useful, build trust with people first, and once you do that, you're in a position to tell them, hey, we should do business together because I can help you with this particular problem that you have. And since they trust you and see you as someone who is a useful person inside of the industry, it ends up translating into some pretty phenomenal things.
Absolutely, and that's a fascinating journey, honestly. What stands out to me most is how you moved from executing the science to shaping the strategic narrative around it. So, and for years, it's a long way, but the results are really impressive. Congratulate you.
Thank you.
You work across cell gene therapy, product management, commercial strategy, and now the executive position. Why do you think so many biotech leaders still underestimate communication as a true strategic asset?
Good question. There's a couple different reasons. I think first of all is just kind of the way that typically, classically, scientists have been trained. The people who are now in executive positions inside of different biotech companies, you typically follow the same framework, right? You go to school, you do your undergrad, you do your master's, you do your PhD, you do your postdoc, and sadly, in many circumstances, academia kind of doesn't prepare you for the real world, where realistically inside of academia, you spend all day, every day inside of a bubble of experts who know the subject matter just as well as you do, if not better, and so therefore you tend to speak in really technical terms that you assume everyone else knows because you've spent the last 8 years or so, right, surrounded by other people that know all of the different short forms and long, expensive names for these different things. But in the real world, that's just not the case, right? Even inside of the industry. And so I would say one of the challenges there, right, is inside of academia as well, right? You live, and your success is based off of publishing, and then that publishing and those different articles getting seen by people and having high impact factors. And there's kind of this idea inside of academia, right, that the science will speak for itself. If you have all the right experiments and you've validated your data correctly, that the best science will to some extent rise to the top. But in the real world, right, that's just not the case. The thing that's necessarily the best isn't going to necessarily rise to the top. The science won't speak for itself. That becomes your job, and you need to be intimately involved in conveying it in a way that other people are going to understand, who don't have the same extent of technical expertise in a very small area that you do. And so, again, I would say that's one of the reasons why executives in the past haven't been as open to it. They kind of have this notion that the science will speak for itself. But for those who have kind of realized, hey, we've got to advocate for our science. We've got to be the ones who are engaging our audience in a way that's going to be valuable, that helps them understand the power of what we're developing. Those are the people that increasingly are starting to win more and more.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And from my own experience, blending clinical expertise with business development and elements of marketing, I've seen how powerful proper positioning can be. When leaders clearly articulate their strategies, direction, it fundamentally shifts trust and opportunity around them. But that kind of positioning requires real strategic clarity and domain understanding, of course, and that's exactly the space you operate in. I imagine that's why your partnerships tend to be so productive. In biotech, we often see fragmented solutions, separate PR agencies, content teams, BD consultants, marketing advisors. Do you believe this fragmentation show down strategic execution? And how does Convey Bio create coherence instead of noise?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's room, right, for hiring different external agencies to come in and help you with some of the things that you might not be as well suited to do yourself, and might be challenging even for you to do inside of your internal team. Honestly, I think one of the challenges that you see there, right, is that you need to have one person inside of the company who's got the authority to make decisions in pulling all of these different external people together. If you just have a bunch of different external vendors and then there's like a board of different people that are all involved in every single decision that this group of external providers is going to make, that's where things really slow down. When you've got a bunch of different people outside that have to all coordinate with a bunch of different people inside, it really helps if you've got like one or two single points of contact inside of an organization that are for the most part the decision makers who are organizing it. And to some extent, that's the way that I operate, right? When I'm speaking with when I'm working with my clients, is typically I'm working with one, at most two different people inside of an organization. There's kind of that very fast approval process. You're able to pivot, you're able to move quickly in order to get organic social media posts out in a timely manner. And so I'd say that's kind of the key component. You need to have a bit more designated ownership inside of the organization to make sure that you're wrangling and making sure you can move quickly with those external clients or external service providers.
Yes, and I do believe it's the biggest challenge in our industry to find this person who really interested and motivated, to implement and to manage those changes and technological changes and visibility of companies. So it's a matter of leadership, I guess, from my perspective at least. And Biotech is fundamentally a trust-driven industry. Investors, regulators, partners, and patients all rely on confidence in leadership. From your perspective, how does consistent executive visibility translate into tangible commercial leverage?
Great question. I think there's a couple different components here to focus on. Again, and it kind of comes back to this idea, first of all, of this idea that the science will speak for itself. That's just not the case. One of the first things that really translates well for executives, building trust and sparking confidence online, is just kind of getting in the reps of people starting to trust you if they don't know who you are. And one of the really clear examples of this, right, would be if you're interested in spending a lot of money with someone, or you're going to be developing some sort of relationship together. There's going to be a series of different dates. There's going to be a period where you're courting each other. You're trying to figure out whether or not you trust this person. And social media, especially when leveraged correctly by executives to be posting from their own profiles, can kind of be that way to build trust at scale, to get in those reps, to get in those touch points with people where you're being useful to them, you're sharing wisdom and insight that's going to be helpful to them. You are doing the work of providing value to them up front with no expectation of anything in return, so that when you actually get an opportunity to meet with them in person for the first time, they already know who you are. They already have a positive perception of you in their head, and they're interested in having a productive conversation from the get-go. There's not that same distrust and trying to figure out whether or not you're here to take advantage of me or whatnot. When you've done the work of being useful and valuable up front, it really helps you move forward those conversations when you actually meet face to face. And then the interesting thing that happens as well, right, is once you have had one of those interactions face to face and you've had a meeting and they go away and maybe they're talking to other service providers or whatnot, you stay top of mind because they're continuing to see your posts on social media that are designed, again, to be useful and valuable and insightful. And so you remain top of mind as kind of that industry expert, where a lot of other vendors that you might be competing with aren't doing that. And so it really becomes this unfair advantage.
Yes, definitely. So value goes first and then go opportunity, right? So, and many executives still view LinkedIn as an optional, almost a side activity. Do you see it simply as a branding channel or as a strategic infrastructure for biotech growth?
Definitely strategic infrastructure at this point. Most people are on here. That's the thing that really separates, I think, this from a lot of other social media platforms. A lot of other social media platforms are somewhat fragmented, be it by age or political affiliation or stuff like that. LinkedIn still kind of seems to be the professional network where everybody at least has a profile and is at least occasionally checking in. It still has a little bit of a reputation, right, of kind of just being a bunch of fluff. But ultimately, this is the professional networking site. This is where people have their industry contacts. They're looking to connect with peers. They're looking to connect with peers. They're looking for that insight. And so, given that there's just such a high concentration of decision makers on this platform, at that C-suite level, at this point, it would be very unwise to completely write off LinkedIn altogether.
Yes, personally, I really like this tool, and I do believe that really a tool. It's not just a social media platform, and this tool connects all us globally. And one friend of mine even told me that he uses LinkedIn as instead of Instagram. You know, he see all the activities from people who he's interested in, and it's something really becomes very popular tool.
Well, on top of that as well, the other challenge there, the other thing that's interesting about LinkedIn as a platform compared to some of these other social medias, like Instagram, like TikTok, is LinkedIn is inherently, and I want to say this carefully, LinkedIn is a little bit more quote unquote boring, right? It's not something that you're likely to spend 45 minutes in a row doom scrolling from one video to the next, the way that TikTok and Instagram are much more designed to do. With LinkedIn, you're going to kind of run out of stuff that's interesting to you that's inside of your niche of the industry fairly quickly. And so it kind of becomes a natural way to get connected, learn a couple things over 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then you've basically got a good chunk of what you need, as opposed to an algorithm that's going to constantly keep feeding you videos, and then, you know, an hour and a half later you're like, how in the world am I still watching how am I watching cat videos on TikTok after an hour and a half when I started out looking at, you know, muscle cars or something? I don't know.
Yes, for sure, definitely agree. And for biotech founders who want to think more strategically about positioning, influence, and long-term visibility, is there a book, framework, or defining experience that shaped your thinking the most that you can recommend?
Several years ago, I took one of the courses by a guy called Justin Welsh. He does quite a bit of thought leadership on LinkedIn. He's kind of one of the original voices on how to use LinkedIn effectively. So he had a course a couple years ago that was really that was really helpful for me, and kind of getting set up and getting some of the foundational principles right and that sort of thing. But above and beyond that, that's kind of where I'd recommend starting. Another good resource would be Gary Vaynerchuk. He's the founder of VaynerMedia. He does a lot of posting on LinkedIn. He's one of the people who actually inspired me to start posting on LinkedIn to start with. So, and he was the one who actually, from earlier in this recording, when I mentioned that initial video that inspired me to start posting on LinkedIn, it was one of his videos. So those would be two areas I'd recommend starting.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's been really interesting and insightful discussion. I really appreciate your time and wish you good luck with all your strategies in LinkedIn and all your business strategies. I'm following you for a while already and I do like your content. So thank you so much for your time and to be my guest today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.